I have a property. It's a 22 unit apartment. I'm buying my partners out. I'm taking over the existing loan that we already have in place. I am going to pay them off kind of like a seller financed second. No money out of pocket, no payments actually for 18 months.
Over halfway through the year now, and I know you're not like a goal guy. What's on the agenda this year? How are you doing with your portfolio? What are you doing that someone can get some value from?
Yeah, it is a good question. I'm not in acquisition mode. This is like the longest stretch I've gone without acquiring property. But that said, I actually do think there's going to be a lot of opportunities on the horizon as a buyer. And I think that's because there is distress in the market. There is properties, especially commercial properties going back to the banks, or the banks are willing to negotiate. So even though I'm not in acquisition mode, that is on my mind, 6 months out, a year out, year and a half out. I do think there's going to be a lot of opportunities, but like you said, I'm really focused on optimizing my current portfolio. I've been selling off some of my smaller properties. So I'm in contract to sell an old duplex that I bought in 2009. Cash flows well, but it's also like we've talked about, like return on equity. I have a lot of equity in these properties that I've held for a long time. And it's the cash flow fundamentals that have allowed me to hold them this long to be able to go, hey, do I keep holding this? I mean, a lot of these I have like 30-year fixed debt on. So I look at that low interest debt. Yes, it's an asset, but also, what can I do with that equity? And then just some other things. Like I have a property, 3 of us own it together. I'm buying my partners out and I'm doing it creatively. I like creative financing. So it's a 22 unit apartment. There's commercial ground floor apartments up top and behind on this property. And I'm buying my partners out, and we've structured it in a way that it's no money out of my pocket. I'm taking over the existing loan that we already have in place. The bank was fine with that. And then I am going to pay them off kind of like a seller financed second. So no money out of pocket, no payments actually for 18 months. We've talked about my Oklahoma property. That was 100% occupancy. There were some major issues there with tenants. And so my property manager aggressively had to get out, some of the bad tenants. When I say bad tenants, we're talking shootings, stabbings, like all the crazy shit that could happen in real estate. People lighting their own apartments on fire, just crazy stuff. That's kind of a ramble, but that's kind of what's on my mind, what's on top of my head, and what I'm doing over these last couple of weeks.
I'm curious, why are your partners? I mean, you are acquisition mode. I mean, if it's a 22 unit apartment complex and you're going to be the sole owner, that is, essentially you are acquiring. I'm curious why they wanted out of that. I think I know which property you're talking about. Why did they want out? Because they're offering you some great terms. I mean, those are fantastic.
Yeah. So it's a mixed use property. It's about an hour south of me. I like the property. I like the property more than my partners. We're 1/3 owners on this. We're all 3 real estate investors. One of the partners is also a lender. She originally lent on the property, and then we refied it with a local bank. I like the property a lot more than them. It's kind of interesting. You have ground floor commercial. You have a barber shop on one side. It used to be a coffee shop on the other side. Now it's like a kind of small boutique knitting kind of place. And then there's a back 5 individual units. And then the other units, the building was single room occupancy, SRO. So it used to be rent by the room. In the last few years, a college had rented it out. They were paying like a master lease for a few years. I really like that. But just as I'm optimizing my portfolio, they're both optimizing their portfolios. They're getting properties off their books. When it comes down to it, I just like this property more than they do. I believe in the property long term, and I'm willing to be patient. I believe, 10 years from now, I'll be really glad that I own this property, and I'm fine owning it by myself, and I'm fine taking on what I think is a small amount of risk because the loan doesn't change the property. Nothing fundamentally changes about the property except for I own 100% of it.
Yeah, I mean, real estate, sometimes one of the best strategies is to be patient. I think multifamily is interesting because you can still get decent appraisals, at least from what I'm seeing. But I don't think it's time to exit out of multifamily. I think maybe we're pulling out of the trough in multifamily, but multifamily is taking a beating nationwide. I mean, obviously it's market specific, but you've got this situation where rates, doubled, tripled, insurance 4x'd in some cases. The cost to maintain these assets have gone up. And you just had a lot of overbuilding in some markets. But, the macro trends show that building has been actually shut off for a while now. And there's just people still need places to live. So once absorption happens in some of these markets, and I don't know if this is this market, you're going to start seeing some rent growth and NOI improvements. And hopefully, I've seen the insurance markets and multifamily settle out. Same thing though, hold assets, refinance. That's what I'm doing on 3 of my apartment buildings. Or on your property in OKC. And I know, because I know that market intimately well, unfortunately or fortunately, because I own 2 apartment complexes in Oklahoma City. I think that's something that people forget too. Some people get so hyper fixated on occupancy, but they don't really look at the quality of the tenant. And that's a really great way to reposition a property, is to sometimes you kind of got to strip it down, get rid of people that are trashing units, not paying rent, causing issues in the community, and then build back up the community with better tenants, which makes the property more lendable. Maybe there's some cap rate compression, more stability in the income, more durability in the net operating income. So rebuilding your tenant base, I think, is a really good strategy, but that also takes patience sometimes.
It takes patience. It takes time. It can take money, or drain you of some funds. And you know the story more intimately than most. But like for our listeners, like small recap. I took this property over. It's 47 units in Oklahoma City. But when I took it over, I had to get every single tenant out because the entire property needed rehab. And this thing was a costly endeavor. I never intended. I went from 18% owner to 69% owner to 100% owner. There's a lot to the story, and I'll leave out the boring or not so boring details just for the sake of time. But I had to get this thing down to 0% occupancy, and then it was a huge construction project. Every unit got rehabbed. This was very costly. And then to really stop that bleeding, there was a local program that helped rehouse people, right? It helped get tenants in. They were paying above market rent. It was subsidized, so the property, and the conversation with the property manager, and it did make sense. We said, hey, for this type of rent, there's a lot we can handle. So it went from 0 to 100% occupancy. But unfortunately, that funding ran out. And with that tenant base, you had some rough tenants. I mean, you're talking literally putting homeless people into homes. And the idea behind it is great. I mean, it was supposed to come with, they would furnish them a year worth of case management, which never happened. Try to help these tenants get jobs and actual, get on long-term Section 8 vouchers. And a good portion of the tenants, they were just still living the lifestyle of, drugs and violence and all sorts of craziness. Like I said, I've had stabbings there, shootings there, all, fires, all these things. But still, the majority of the tenants are still good tenants that just need some help financially. And so even though it got to 100% occupancy, over time, that occupancy had to go down to about 68%. And we talk about being creative in buying real estate, but you can also be creative in lease up. The property manager has implemented so many things and so many different things, and the willingness to be creative to try to get good tenants in there. Just because they're lower income doesn't mean they're not good tenants. Once you own a property, there's creative things you can do with inside your own portfolio to increase revenue or to keep a property occupied or reoccupy a property. And I think that oftentimes investors, especially new investors, they think you buy the property and then it's over and then you're done. Even a creative buyer, oftentimes once you own the asset, you still need to be creative. You still need to problem solve. You still need to come up with solutions. Just because you own the property doesn't mean the fun stops there.
It's interesting though. I think people again get excited about getting heads in beds or getting, occupancy up, but take your time. Make sure you set your standard right with the tenant base. Make sure that you're underwriting these tenants right. Make sure they've got the right credit score, no eviction histories, maybe bankruptcy, things like that, because there's like a lot of hidden cost to the wrong tenant. I mean, obviously not paying, that's a cost. Then there's legal fees for evictions and things like that. There's also the cost of a transient nature of a tenant. I'm curious on, you said you went from 100 down to like 60 and now you're rebuilding. And I know this property, these were all, recently renovated the right way, by the way, renovated units. Are these tenants leaving the property and leaving the units in good condition as they vacate? or do you have to go in with more CapEx going into that?
What do you think? What do you think, Travis? I see the smirk on your face. I think you know the
No,
answer. No,
there's no smirk, man. I mean, I've made that mistake too. We've had property managers in some of my multifamily units that were just like lease, and then you got to strip it back down and rehab the unit again, and
I mean, look, real estate. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we often talk about the good. Sometimes we talk about the bad. Sometimes we talk about the ugly. Like, look, real estate is amazing. I will stand by that. Real estate has done me well, served me well, has created a lot of opportunities, a lot of wealth, a lot of freedom in my life, and a lot of really cool opportunities. But real estate is also hard and ugly sometimes, man. And yeah, it's one thing. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years. I mean, I've seen some gross units, and then I've seen destroyed units. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I think because some of the tenants that were in there, because drugs were involved, because some of these units, like, I don't even know what the hell happened. Like, why are there massive holes in the wall, like 30 of them? And why are there like wires pulled out of the wall? Like, it's some crazy shit. They're not all left like that, but it's, my property manager will send me a picture and I'm just thinking how did that even happen? It's like there's normal turnover. And I remember pretty early on in my journey, it's like I realized that turnover and vacancy is expensive. But then when you add this isn't just like, hey, it needs some cleaning. Some of the units are, yeah, it needs a little cleaning, need some paint touch up. But some of these, it's like it looked like a miniature war went off in that unit. And I'm getting videos sent to me. And I'm thinking like how?
You mentioned, I put a bow on this for this episode for people listening. Have discernment in the people you put in too. Like, I remember a lesson I learned. I had a duplex. This guy was like, yes, I have some blips on my rental history. I have some blips with my credit. Here are the things I've done to turn my life around. Here's some things. Give me a chance. I want a chance. I don't meet the criteria for this unit. And I was like, the human side of me is like, yeah, I want to give this guy a chance. I want to, get him in a nice unit. But man, I'm going to tell you more often than not, that backfires. This guy went back into his old ways and actually just left the property. So if you're listening to this, heed that warning.
I think it's also why it's important to separate yourself from the tenant. I mean, I actually like people. I really do. I really love people. And so, again, I've been doing this 20 years, so I've not managed my properties for a very long time. But when I started out, like most of us, I did manage my own properties. And I remember one of my very first rentals. I mean, it was a nice home, had new carpet, and the tenant, I loved the tenant. I was self-managing, nice woman, right? But she had spilt bleach all over this new carpet. And so when she moved out, I had to take her deposit. And she was so mad. I mean, like the stuff she messaged me, and I'm thinking like, she was a great tenant, and then I had to be that guy, right? At the same time, like she literally spilled bleach all over a new carpet that cost more than what her deposit was. And I still had her upset with me, for charging her. I didn't even charge her for the carpet. I just took her deposit, which didn't even cover, all of it. And I was like, man, I don't like being that person. And it's also why I just think it's important to have a professional, have a property manager, be that person. So, that it's not you making those calls. It's not you having to say, hey, yeah, because like the human in me always feels for what the tenant's going through. And in a lot of cases, the tenant's always going through something. And if you always give, and I'm fine giving, but if you always give, well, that property's not going to make money and you're not going to be able to keep that property.
Yeah. Well, you and I are the same way. We're glasses half full, especially with people, and we tend to trust people and see the good in people, which is an admirable trait. But I do agree. And also property management is important, not to separate you from the tenants for the reasons you just stated, but also you doing those activities and texting her back and forth on this deposit is not a good use of your time. You could have went and found the next asset. And also property managers allow you to scale. Like if you didn't have property management, you can't scale to hundreds or thousands a unit. You need to build leverage into your systems, and management is huge. So, and managers are not created equal, especially if you have third-party property managers. Man, like there's really, really bad ones and there's really, really good ones. You find a good one like you have, then you can build a business around that.